Ata Maria, and good morning, and welcome to the BDO RETHINK series for 2021, and a particular warm welcome to Antonia Watson, the CEO of ANZ. Just to remind our viewers on the webinar, BDO has been running a RETHINK series since the start of COVID last year, and our objective here is to help New Zealand businesses rethink and look at their strategy and purpose, help them build resilience around their business, and think about the future, their growth strategy, risk management, and a whole raft of topics that we've brought to you through this webinar series, just simply to help the thinking around your boardroom table. Just to remind you also, after the presentation, there's a Q&A, and you are welcomed to send questions through. Just so Antonia knows, I'm not picking up my emails. I'll be looking at those questions and putting those through to you after your presentation. Just so viewers know, we need to just wrap up at 9:20. Antonia's got a pretty tight deadline today, and so needs to get away. So we won't be running through to 9:30. We'll be finishing at 9:20 this morning. The topic of today is purpose-driven governance, and so we set up 2021 looking at you and your businesses and having governance with a purpose. And so we feel it's a fantastic example of an organisation profiled and large within the New Zealand community that is very much purpose-driven. And so it is my pleasure to hand over to Antonia. Remember, fire your questions through and we'll get those hopefully answered. If we don't in the period, we'll definitely come back to you in emails. So, Antonia, welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora tātou. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me along to speak today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our purpose at ANZ and a bit about how it informs our decision making. I'll use a couple of examples for that. But I thought I would just start by taking you back to it was early 2016, and Shane Elliott, who's a renowned Kiwi, he's our group CEO and one of my two bosses. He became group CEO of ANZ, and he had 4 key priorities that he was very open and transparent about when he joined or when he got the role. And one of them, I'm just going to read it verbatim because I think it resonates very well with today's discussion. So, and it was number 4, drive a purpose and values-led transformation of the bank by creating a stronger and more cohesive culture built around ethics, humility, and a clearer sense of our core purpose. Investing in leaders who can help the bank sense and navigate the changing environment, live the values and care for their own people, and amend products, policies and services to embed fairness as a core consideration in everything that we do. And interestingly, he's just done a reflection to our group board, which is meeting at the moment, on the past 5 years, and that's where that came up again. I thought, oh, perfect timing.
Perfect.
And I think when you think about that, well, that was early 2016. If you fast forward a couple of years, and banking in general, but banking in Australia particularly, went through a pretty fraught 14 months or so of the Royal Commission, and that was mostly in 2018. And I don't know how much you people on the webinar followed that. We certainly were glued to it. But ANZ, you know, there were certainly case studies that involved us, and it wasn't pretty a lot of the time, but ANZ actually came out of that Royal Commission probably the best placed of the big 4 banks in Australia in terms of issues, ongoing litigation, reputation. We've still got our same CEO, and our chair is now retired, but not as a result of the Royal Commission. So I think that having started that purpose and values-led transformation a couple of years earlier really started to play into how we could present ourselves as an organisation during that rather fraught time. And so what we did is we launched our purpose, which is to shape a world where people and communities thrive. Often that can sound quite trite. What does that mean? But embedding it was a really important part of launching it. So and the launch or the development of it, I was involved in some of it. We're really involved in what do we do? Why do we come to work? And I've really noticed staff over the last 5 years picking that up and saying, well, is that thing I'm doing going to help shape a world where people and communities thrive? And as part of embedding it, we said, you know, well, what does that mean we care about the most? And we sort of thought as an organisation, where can we make a difference? it had to be credible, and so we picked 3 particular things. One was housing and helping people into warm, dry homes and home ownership. One was environmental sustainability, where we believe we can play a big part. And the other one was financial well-being. So there's all sorts of causes you can choose, but those are ones that we felt connected to our purpose of shaping a world where people and communities thrive, but also to something that we could really credibly present as a bank. So that sort of reason for being, why do you get out of bed every morning, has become more and more important. And I think as community standards and expectations of banks and of companies in general have changed a lot, especially since social media and the ability to amplify bad things that happen really quickly, having something like that sits behind your decision making, I think, has really stood us in good stead. So if we can put up the first slide, I hope you can read that. It talks about our vision and our strategy. So at the top there you've got our purpose, and then you think about what that means for us as an organisation and what we do for our customers. And you can see all across the business, what do our customers want from us? Well, they want to save and stay on top of their money. They want to buy and own homes. I won't read out the rest, but again, that's us thinking from a, we're not looking at, it's not from a, I want to sell you a home loan, I want to sell you some insurance, I want to set you up for the transaction account. It's thinking again purposefully, well, how are our products helping our customers get ahead in their lives? And certainly our purpose came to play very, very strongly last year when COVID hit. It was, I think, compared to other crises that have impacted banks, we were really proud of the way that we could be part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. If you think back to the GFC, there's no doubts that the banks were part of the problem, especially internationally, and we were really able to play our part there. And we certainly had a difficult year. We knew as soon as the crisis hit that it wasn't going to be pretty in terms of profitability. But we also knew that we were going into it in a really strong position in terms of capital, in terms of liquidity, in terms of funding. In the GFC, we couldn't keep lending because we couldn't fund our lending book. Here, we had plenty of liquidity and funding, so we were able to keep lending. We were able to have the liquidity to cease repayments of loans for quite a long period of time. It's ended up being up to 6 to 8 months. And the role that our customers were, and many of you might have been among them, they were frightened. There was so much uncertainty. No one knew how long the economy was shut down for. And our staff were able to be at the end of the phone helping customers and saying, look, it's okay, we can help you through this. Let's work out what the best solution for you is, to just take a pause while we can work out over the next few months what this is going to end up looking like. And we actually ended up in the position of helping. In total, we supported 49,000 personal home loan and business customers, and that was through either full repayment deferrals, switching to interest only, term extensions, those sorts of loan adjustments, $35 billion of lending. And fortunately, I think the fortunate position that we're in New Zealand now, we're seeing much of that recovering now. So that's really good. But to be able to be in that position to be able to keep supporting our customers, but also have our staff with here's what we're here for. We're about helping people and communities thrive, and we can play a really important part of this. Was a really nice way of connecting purpose. And I think as we think about coming out of the crisis and longer term support for businesses, because there will be businesses that need it. Things are looking rosy in lots of places, but I think there are definitely segments of the economy that are still hurting. I think I just take you back to things like the dairy downturn and the PSA crisis for kiwi fruit, where in the past I think banks were probably very quick to try and cure the loan in a not so pleasant manner. I think that what we've learned is it's in all our interests, and certainly when you think of that purpose-led way of doing business, that it's in all our interests that our clients survive through this. So how can we help them do that? And so that's something that we were able to demonstrate with something like the kiwi fruit sector in PSA when that just halted income for growers, and we saw them through. So it's in our interest to help our customers in the long term, and we will still continue to do that. But look, our purpose has informed our decisions a bit more broadly, and I'll talk through a couple of examples of that. The first one is our partnership with Age Concern, and that's around one of those 3 pillars I talked about, supporting financial well-being, and that's with digital literacy effectively. So if you think about returning to level 3 last week, it's a reminder that we're still in this very uncertain times. But if you go back to the real lockdown last year, there were customers who had never interacted with us digitally that literally couldn't come to a branch, even when we were open for small hours. It was not in their interest health-wise to be leaving, if you are vulnerable in some way, to be leaving your home. And we sort of sat around the table as a leadership team and thought very early on, we are in a pretty good position. We are in a position where we will remain profitable. It might be not quite as profitable, but it was, we were in a position to help, and we did a bunch of donations, but one of them was to 500,000 to Age Concern, to partner with them to help them with that digital literacy type of thing for some of our more elderly population and look, our oldest user of our app is 104, so it's not every elderly person that needs it. But a lot of people are uncomfortable with the technology, and the world is changing. So helping them create a long-term digital literacy plan, we felt was of a big benefit. But it didn't just stop with the donation. It was something that we've now spread across our network, and we had a partnership with them already. But we're using our staff, and many of them it's on their volunteer days, to go out and partner with Age Concern, going out to retirement villages or rest homes and talking through the technology with some of the customers. And I think one of the things that demonstrates is the sort of a 3-point scale. If you think about purposefulness, there's the sort of organisations running themselves conventionally, the purpose is to make some money and support the shareholders and hire some staff and provide some goods and services to society. There's your sort of virtuous purpose, which is you might have a foundation. We do have a staff foundation that provides grants into the community. You might do it by other ways, or donations or volunteer leave. But the audacious purpose is where it's really embedded, and that's what we aim to have. And I think the Age Concern partnership, where our staff are putting up their hands and saying, this is really important to the communities that we work in, that they've got this digital financial literacy, and I want to help. And it might be through my volunteer day, it might be getting together a few people from my branch and going into the local rest home for the afternoon. I think that just demonstrates something that's more than just writing a cheque or making sure that you get that profit purpose going. So I'll just play a video. The video will hopefully get played that shows that in action, if we can cue that. Thank you.
We are here today at Age Concern doing this tech workshop to educate them on all things technology, all things digital.
We really appreciate having volunteers come in. Just be patient with each other, enjoy, have fun.
Simple things like boosting a bit of confidence in terms of how they could use their smart devices like iPhones, iPads, and even their laptops, and showing them a bit of internet.
So if you press contacts,
what
so
do you do now?
This comes up with Rosalie's mobile number.
My daughters, who I asked to teach me after I bought the phone, just said, "You won't get it, Mum." End of.
Yes.
Why don't we call my number and then we can practice?
Thank you.
So we'll go 021.
I got one-to-one service and patience. It gives me confidence. That's what I've come for. I'll go away much happier.
Would you like me to show you how to do it?
There's been a tremendous fall back in the number of people signing in. I'm not doing it. Most people aren't doing it.
Yes. How easy is it?
One of the reasons I didn't know how to program the jolly thing. My fingers just seemed to be too big. I'll go away a lot more confident and I'll use the thing.
Speaking from my experience, we do have a lot of elderly customers walking into the branch. At times, they do not know what we know. And I think it's passing on our information, because our main purpose at ANZ is where communities and people thrive. Seeing our elderly, engaged, it was a great, rewarding experience.
We have been made aware of the fact we need to know about passwords and how security works, and not only that, the other apps that can help us streamline the usage of our phones.
I've been a sculptor for the last 50 years. Now that I'm selling my sculptures all over the world again, I'll need that internet banking. So today's a big day for me, and I'm just so happy that I actually came in and learnt what I have today.
Just a lovely group of people, and there was no pressure. And I looked around the room and the people were smiling, so they weren't afraid, and they became involved and engaged. And we go away feeling pretty chuffed.
Right, it's back to you.
Okay, back to me. So I hope you enjoyed that. That our content people are really good at telling some of these stories, and the opportunities for our staff to be involved in some of this stuff, they absolutely love it. They having an employer that is willing to help them get involved in the community and sort of embrace that kaupapa has been really powerful. The second example I wanted to talk about of sort of bringing our purpose to light is something that's on everyone's minds at the moment, the old housing crisis. And certainly the fix to it is there's absolutely no silver bullet, because I think we'd have used that silver bullet if we had it. But look, banks can certainly play a part, and we've implemented some measures to try and help bring balance to the housing market. And one of them was recommending, as part of our consultation on the LVR changes to the RBNZ, that requiring a 30% deposit for residential investment lending actually probably wasn't going to shift the dial, and that we recommended 40, which is what they've gone with. We actually put our money where our mouth was before Christmas, and did that in advance, because we felt like we had to back our consultation result. But as we thought about what can we do, again, our purpose came to light, because we looked at things, should we extend that across owner-occupier lending, for example? And then we thought, well, actually, no, our purpose and our strategy is to get people into their homes. So we don't want to put in something that's going to stop people getting into their own homes. And so that was a purposeful discussion even when we did that. But look, there are longer term solutions, and if we go on to the next slide, which should be of an apartment building, this is, it's called 26 Araha. It's a housing project that we've been really proud to be involved in. It's a new build to rent development, and build to rent is quite nascent, I think, in New Zealand, but it also, along with that, it puts community and sustainability at its heart. There are 13 apartments, and the tenants can have guaranteed long-term tenures of up to 10 years at fair market rents. Now, if you think about bank lending, I don't know how many of you know much about our development lending, but it will usually be, we want this amount of pre-sales, we want an experienced developer, we want to know all these different things about you to make sure that we really feel like we can get behind that development and lending to it, because it is, in crises, it always tends to be the first thing that we incur losses on. So in this case, we had a developer that wanted to do this build to rent, so no pre-sales. They were also an inexperienced developer, but here was something that's going to help provide sustainable long-term housing. And if that social aspect isn't enough, it's also going for Homestar 9. So at the moment, Homestar 6 is pretty good. We got a build that we did rated Homestar 6, and we were very proud. So Homestar 9 is almost as good as you get. I think you can get up to 10. So, insulation, double glazing, solar hot water, solar power, rainwater harvesting, and all that on top of the build to lease kaupapa is also all those things are designed to save the tenants at least 25% of their normal household costs.
Oh.
So we did have to change our thinking when we did this and take a bit of a wider perspective on how we'd usually approach a development lend like this. So, you know, looking at cash flow, looking at the size of debt on completion when the apartments were rented. The developers, as I said, were doing it for the first time, but they got estimates and projections of their cash flow, and because of the long-term tenure of the leases, they could actually project that out 20 years or so, and it helped us understand how the project could work from a financial perspective, even though usually we'd expect some sort of profit at completion that could then help pay off the lending. The green building meant that it was more expensive to build. The sustainable materials and some of those innovations do cost a little bit more. Not as much more as you'd think if you're ever thinking about building a very sustainable building, and we can lend you money to help you with that, because we do have a special loan rates for 6-star and above home lending. But you know, that payback and understanding the overall running costs of the building really helped. Being involved early on really helped, and we just felt that if you think about our purpose of helping people in communities thrive, plus the fact that we feel that we can really be involved in that from a provision of housing and environmental sustainability, here's a project that ticks the boxes, and working really hard to make it work was really important to us. So it's something that we're really proud of, the owners are really proud of. It's exceeded its rental projections. It's actually become a bit of a poster child for how green, socially equitable apartments can work, and something that we'd love to be able to do more of. If you just pop the next slide over, I thought I would just talk a little bit about one of those three things being environmental sustainability. And we've made a lot of commitments at the ANZ group level about reducing our carbon emissions. We are carbon neutral, but some of that at the moment is still about buying credits. So in my mind, in my slightly rather green, I try to be as green as I can. You know, to me, you want to be truly carbon neutral. So we're looking at that. And so all the usual things around that sort of thing. We've also committed to funding and facilitating up to $50 billion Aussie of investment in environmentally sustainable solutions. In New Zealand, I mean, there's various action groups that will often accuse us of lending to fossil fuels. As a group, I think in Australian banking, it's very hard not to be, and there's a lot of legacy lending to fossil fuels. But we've come out and said we want to be out of that by 2030. As I think, and we've committed to working with our largest emitting institutional customers to support them to zero carbon. In New Zealand, we have something like 0.025 of our lending book is now to fossil fuels, and mainly that's gas, so a transition thing. And we actually do way more lending to new technologies, solar and other green power sources. And we're doing a lot of stuff. What we aren't very good at doing, I think, in New Zealand, ANZ New Zealand, is pulling it all together. The group has done it very well. We actually report separately on environmental sustainability. We have a different analyst call, aside from our financial results call. We have a different sort of annual report and I think the good thing about the climate-related financial disclosures that we're working towards in New Zealand will be, you know, it will help us bring everything together that we're doing at the moment. There's a lot around sustainable finance, green bonds, green lending. Apparently, I just heard ANZ as a group has a 7% market share of global sustainable and green financing, which I think is absolutely remarkable. So we are supporting our customers on that sustainability journey. I mentioned the discounted home loans for Green Star. We have interest-free loans for warming up your home, the products I talked about in the big end of town space, and the green bonds and that sort of thing. So, so just to wrap up, hopefully I'm not taking up too much time. You know, look, people go to work for three things, right? To earn money, to advance their careers, and to feel part of something. And I think it's that feel part of something that purpose helps you do. You know, we've certainly had a rocky couple of years at ANZ, especially the year before last. And, you know, part of it was, well, why do you come to work? And it was 2 million customers and 8,000 staff, and that sense of how as banks we can help out, be part of our communities. And I think that COVID really brought that to the front, and I think it reminded people that banks are a big part of keeping economies ticking, and we can really play a part in that. So really proud of what we did along those lines. And I think our staff would say that. We have engagement scores in the 80s, which is apparently best practice for financial services globally, and it's just good business. And I think the examples that I've shown you show that the way that purposefulness can drive good business. So open to any questions.
Thank you, and there are a few questions. So I might just start with one that I had. And in your presentation, you were very clear that it was 5 years ago that you set about on this journey. But do you think COVID has accelerated a further thinking in purpose-driven? Has there been a step up because of what's come out of COVID?
I don't. It's COVID has focused the attention on how helpful it is to have a purpose. It's, having that thing that's set behind how are we going to respond to this crisis, what's our role to play in it. So I think it didn't change anything, but it magnified the impact of being purposeful in what we do.
Right. Okay. Thinking of our client base, and our client base is predominantly in that mid-market SME. So many of our clients, and there are a number of your clients, are starting to think about purpose-driven governance. Is it, or do you see it becoming a determinant as part of your assessment at looking at clients coming on board? Will it be something that becomes a criteria for the bank to consider?
I think that yes. When we look at clients now, and especially if you're looking at clients involved in land or so in the agri space and that sort of thing, purpose, community, sustainability, where companies are involved in that sense. Do we need to help you transition to zero carbon? That it is becoming more of a thing. I think that as a network, you will tend to be. I think we're talking to more privately owned businesses, and we have a large network of privately owned business customers. I think when you think about purpose, and you're not a big corporate, I think you're in even a better shape because you haven't got to report to any analysts. You can actually genuinely think, why am I in business? What is the value that I bring to my community? How can I bring my staff along on the journey? And sometimes when we're able to see some of the things that our privately owned businesses can do without that additional external pressure, I certainly feel jealous of the ability to get involved in communities and sustainabilities and purposeful things like that that you have in the privately owned business sector.
Yeah, because I think that is because the skeptics, and there will be people who are skeptical about purpose-driven governance, they would sit back and say, well, of course, someone like ANZ and large public profiled institutions and stock exchange listed need to be seen. But some of our privately held clients would go, well, we're not in that public profile. Yeah. We don't have that pressure. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting because one of the reasons, and Shane was previously our group CFO, and he was involved because whilst it was launched in 2016, there was a couple of years of research behind it, but it was seeing companies that were purpose-led and how genuinely that was making a difference to them in the way that just to take it back to I talked about the Royal Commission. That was an incredibly, it's probably the wrong thing to say because it was a really important thing for the industry, but it was also a big distraction, and it's still taking a lot of effort around for a lot of people that could otherwise be focused on helping customers within these organisations. So the fact that I believe that our purpose-driven change and that Shane led has also helped us as an organisation have time and effort to focus on things that can help our customers more, let alone the fact that we were doing a lot of them already because we were thinking about things I talked about earlier in that quote about product suitability and what's the right thing to do for customers. So I think they all fit nicely together, and they fit nicely in terms of when you think about your reputation. It's not just big companies that end up on the front page of the paper when they do something that doesn't quite feel right with the public. And if you're thinking, well, in our case, is that thing we're going to do really shaping a world where people and communities thrive? No, let's not do it because there's probably a good reason not to do it, and it might end up that's something that comes back to bite us from a community standards and expectations is a banking term that was used a lot in the Royal Commission. So that's something that we look at often. But I do think that purpose is highly linked to that community standards and expectations, and all companies now are being just held to a much higher standard. It isn't a buyer beware world. It's you've got to be doing and seen to be doing the right thing for your customers, not just having a pure profit motive.
There are some businesses that are doing very well coming out of COVID. There are others that are struggling. So some might say purpose-driven governance, and it sort of goes in line with you had a commission inquiry going on, noise, but actually it was something that had to be dealt with. Some people, and New Zealand businesses most probably rely on the wait to have because it's regulated, it's pushed, and they're not so focused because they're dealing with other issues. Stepping back, do you think purpose-driven governance is beyond just, for some organisations, fluffy? It actually creates or enhances performance, productivity. Because I think for those in the audience be going, but is there a financial bottom line benefit?
Yeah, look, I think there is, because I think that David and I, before we came on, were talking a bit about COVID and the response of the New Zealand community to buying local and supporting people that that might be struggling. And I think that that's a purposeful thing for us to be doing as Kiwis, and you can see that is having a financial impact, because most organisations, when I go around our network, and you might be the same, we're actually saying we're doing better than we did last year.
Yes,
we've been, it's been extraordinary, and I know that's not everyone, but it's the vast majority is what we're seeing. New Zealanders are supporting New Zealand, and I think when you play that through, is that if you're doing the right thing, people support you. People are looking for how they can help organisations that are doing the right thing. And you look at the people buying ethically. I'm about to start using shampoo that comes in a bar instead of shampoo that comes in a bottle, so I have less bottles to put in landfill. So I finally found one that works nicely. All those things that people are doing, and so that purposeful and ethical overlay is actually becoming really important to customers. So if you can demonstrate it, I think the customers then follow, because that's how people are thinking these days.
Okay, here's a question, and it probably comes to the heart of moving purpose-driven governance into an organisation. From Hamish here, what process did the board adopt, and how did it interact with management in developing those purpose targets?
It was so the lead actually came from management. It was very much something that Shane said to the board as CEO, this is one of the 4 things I'll do. And so they can now hold him account to that, and have held him to account for that, but it was actually driven from CEO level. But we embedding it in targets around what we've seen. We have a very balanced scorecard. It's not just financial targets, but actually you can see how it plays out into financial. 7% of global sustainability related lending and bonds and that sort of thing. That's pretty good for an Australasian bank. So you can see how that thought process is played out into financial things, but also into people measures. And if you've got people who are more engaged, more willing to speak up if they see an issue, that actually translates into incremental effort when times are tough. It translates into better productivity. So all those things then flow off the back of it as well. If people really, have something behind them that says, this is why I care about coming to work, and this is what I have to help my customer with, they're more likely to have a conversation. I mean, one of the big things that we've done in banking over the last few years is moved from sales targets to no sales targets. So you have to have something like a purpose that says, well, why am I going to help my customer here? And we've actually found that if customers are having conversations without a sales target sitting behind them, they are more thinking about the customer's needs and will often have more product sales as a result, because they're genuinely thinking about what does the customer need, not what is going to give me the sales points this week, and where am I below my target, so I might have to push this. And those are sorts of behaviours that we have seen in the past, and I still see it in other organisations outside banking now, because sometimes you get offered something, you can just tell the thing behind it has nothing to do with what I need, it's behind what some sort of incentive that a salesperson is being given.
So yours, your journey starting on that was management driven, to which a board adopted, and I'm assuming for some organisations that might be a bit of an ask, because if the board aren't aligned and focused and don't actually see that might be a hard driver for.
And I certainly wasn't part of the team at that stage of how Shane brought the board along on the journey, because he would have brought them along the journey on the way,
Right.
but it was more management and staff that developed the purpose. We had workshops and what are we here for and all that sort of thing, and it did help to have a chair who at the time, David Gonski, had a very similar set of values to Shane, and yes, that did help, but then that doesn't mean that it isn't something, if you genuinely believe in it, that you can't influence, because hopefully I've given a sense of what it's meant for our organisation and the benefits that we've gained from it.
So do you think it's lifted performance or productivity, or just strengthened the culture within the organisation?
Definitely strengthened the culture. Performance and productivity, it gets hard to measure, but I guess one thing that you could say is that as we've dropped sales targets, we haven't dropped sales.
Okay.
So there's something that's meaning that people will sit in front of their customers and do the right thing by them in terms of how can I help meet your financial needs, and that's no longer having a sales target. That's now, how can I help you thrive in the way that our purpose, our purpose says. So I think there is a link there, but it's hard to measure.
Yeah. Here, a question from Terence, directed, I think, directly at you. Do you see your role even bigger than described with climate change? Money is one of the main motivators in business, and if you lent money cheaper for projects that would reduce climate change, this would see real change in a private sector to tackle the issue.
Yes, yes, and we do. I mean, we effectively are already with some of the commitments that we've made, and I think it's something that you'll see more and more happening, because I do think that banks, insurance companies are going to be a big part of driving climate change, because some risks are going to become, or some things are going to become uninsurable as well. So we actually see ourselves with the ability to play quite a big part in this. And then the other part of it is how we help our customers transition away. In Australia, we still have carbon coal producing customers. Coal's a big part of the Australian economy, and we've made a commitment to exit that, so we have to help these customers. We can't just turn the tap off and say give us back our money. We have to help them on that transition.
I actually personally see always the bank as very core, because you're normally the first point of contact. I know people always say that professional services firms have good, strong relationships with clients, but banks can drive up a lot. And I'm just picking up this question here, sort of in line with my thinking. How do you ensure you continue to live the purpose of the bank with the ANZ team, that it's just not words on the wall, and that actually some of your clients start to see?
And that is that, and we've worked very hard on embedding it and having the proof points and having those things, the housing, environmental sustainability, financial wellbeing. I mean, to give another example, we've been very cautious for many years on dairy lending, and that's because, quite frankly, in the 2000s we went too hard, basically. So we had a lot to work through in the GFC sort of time frame, and so we've been really cautious. Now, COVID, we basically said we want to focus on our existing customers, but we've just opened up to new dairy again. But that's new dairy where it's sustainable, can prove that they're doing the right thing by their climate. And so that's one of the things we're saying. To be a good risk, you actually need to be able to demonstrate to us that you're doing these things, and we can help you. But that's actually become one of our core criteria about new to bank dairy lending, because otherwise our focus has been on supporting our existing customers, which is a very large customer base because we're a very large bank.
The dairy industry is a good example because it's one that's been now heavily regulated to step up, particularly around sustainability and dealing with climate issues, water, etc. But do you see, for those that aren't still listening and hearing and most probably even resist the regulatory, do you see that the bank may play a role in saying you must demonstrate, or you must have a board member that starts to align to these views?
Yeah, no, I do see that. I do see, and we see some of that already. You know,
right.
we're encouraging the right governance. I mean, you know, some businesses have grown over time to the level where, you know, sort of without thinking, it suddenly should have that governance. It should potentially have a, you know, professional management, and that's a big part of how we help our customers, is help them recognise that time. I'm sure you do to an extent as well. Help them recognise that time, but also be talking to them about, you know, here's what you need to be doing, because there'll come a time where you won't be able to refinance, or you won't be able to do whatever, because that will be even more of a strict criteria than the sort of thing that we're looking at the moment.
And so hopefully we don't have to get to a regulatory environment to have that.
I'd love to think we don't.
Yeah,
I'd love to think that Kiwis and Kiwi businesses care enough to look for, you know, and if they need help, you know, what does that transition look like? I mean, everyone understands it's not overnight. Everyone understands there's a cost behind it, and you know, we've got funding set aside to help people with some of those sustainability challenges that are being regulated in the agri space.
We'll just touch on that a bit, because I think companies, in terms of, again, clients who are under the radar screen, who should be starting to look at risk management, who should be starting to put in governance that deals with those. And they'd always argue it's a cost and they don't necessarily see the benefit. How can we, and I say professional services and banks, provide some assistance? Like, is that something that, because it's a cost, is that something that could be funded or helped or supported?
Yeah, and it certainly can, and it's also, you know, it's in our interest as well, because a professionally run organisation is more likely to be able to be successful in the long term and then, you know, pay back their lending or whatever. You know, it's in our interest that our customers thrive.
Yeah.
And I think then you think in New Zealand's interests, if you start thinking about good governance and making your governance more formal as you grow, it actually gives you a platform to keep growing, because at a point in time you can't be doing it around the kitchen table anymore. And I think, you know, the whole Kiwi batch boat and beamer and I'm done thing is a great, you know, it's a great reflection on Kiwis and our culture, but it's actually not going to help us with the productivity challenge in our economy in the long term. So how can we, whether it's professional services firms, banks, help customers with what they need to help them grow? I think it's really important.
A left field question, indirect, but so someone very keen, anonymous. Why do you think a move to 60% LVR for investment properties would help ease the housing crisis?
Oh, look, it's a tiny easing, right? The reason we said 60 was because that was the level that it went to in 2016, and we did see it make a difference. It didn't fix. There's nothing any bank can do, or the Reserve Bank, to fix this. We can do the little tweaks, and I think there's a lot of little tweaks that can happen. We also just need to pile in some supply, because at the end of the day, we still need supply, which is why there are carve-outs of that, for example, for new buildings and new construction, because there's nothing. The last thing we want to do is to put a brake on supply. But there's just so much that can be done. But we look at what little part we can play, and then part of that the part we can play is just making sure in an environment like this that people borrow responsibly and we lend responsibly, and that people have got an equity buffer and they've got a plan B, and they can afford to pay at a higher interest rate, because that will come one day.
Yeah.
That they've got a backup plan if they lose their job, so whether that's income protection insurance or something like that. So making sure that people are paying off principal. You know, it sort of doesn't sound like in a bank's interest that people pay down their debt, but it is in our interest, because we need to make sure that people are in a sustainable borrowing position. And you know, $1 million mortgage at the moment is going to cost you $25,000 in interest. Many families can afford that, but paying down $1 million of debt has still got to happen if you want to enjoy a debt-free retirement, for example.
And it's good to see we didn't get any interest questions. Before we came on, Antonio and I were just talking, Liz was talking on Morning Report on national radio, and had just got in there before, unfortunately, cut off, that interest rates will go up at some point.
Stage,
yeah. Irrespective of the heydays we're in, it has to change. Yeah. Very conscious of time, and I know you need to get away. First of all, I just want to apologise to all the webinars. Evidently, the video did not play. We didn't get, while you would have seen people, you didn't unfortunately get the sound. Are you okay if we just email that out to people?
Of course, yeah. No, we play that across our social media channels, so definitely no problem with that.
Right, so we'll get that out to you, and apologies that technology didn't quite work. Sorry, there's one last question that just came in from Katie. We're a small startup, so this is important. 3.5 years we're in. We're operating on a nationwide scale, and our strategy has been firmly purpose-driven from the start, albeit from a management level rather than a governance level, the governance being very small. Do you see it as a long game approach, as we're absolutely seeing benefits from a customer brand and reputation perspective, but a little slower in profits? So I suppose it's hurting in the short term.
Yeah. There is a long game element to it. I mean, good on you. It sounds like you've got a wonderful business. There is a long game to it, but I mean, you've started a business that's purposeful, and it sounds like your customers are embracing that. And I think that more and more we're seeing people looking for those kinds of business. So I definitely think starting a business along those lines is absolutely worthwhile. And I think any small startup's going to have, difficulty with immediate profitability. So I don't think that being purposeful is necessarily the reason, the reason behind that. I think,
I think it's a great start. Yeah, Katie. Hopefully you're a client, Katie at BDO. Look, Antonia, as I said, conscious that you need to get away. Thank you very much. You're 15 months into the journey of a CEO. We wish you a continuing success. You've done really well, and you've come on board and had a couple of issues to deal with, so you've got your feet firmly on the ground. We do very much appreciate the time that you've taken. To those out there, we are running this series through the rest of this year. So look on our website. We're looking to run them every second month. There's over 350 people on this webinar, so that tells us that they are definitely serving a purpose and you're interested. So there's more content coming up on the Rethink. I wish you a very profitable day. Keep looking out there, be purpose-driven in your governance, and it all will at some point go to the bottom line. Thank you. Enjoy your day. Thank you, Antonia.